Previously on episode 8.
The purpose, has been to create the mirror that allows people to see themselves. And for me, that mirror is the art. And it's not just the art, but it's also the teaching, and specifically teaching these courses in, Africana studies / theater. And so it's giving people an opportunity to see themselves, know themselves, remember, put back the pieces.
Welcome to another timeless conversation, episode 9, Longing to Belong, All Roads Lead to Purpose. We taped our episode December 2021. I hope you enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Boosie Teaches podcast. As we say here at Boosie Teaches, in a galaxy of learners, Boosie Teaches lights the way. As our host Tanya Busico says to her students, come on in, relax, we'll be here a while. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Boosie Teaches podcast. I am Tanya Busico, and today we have two amazing youth theologians. I'm so excited about this episode. We have Reverend Abigail Rusert. Is that how you say your last name? Rusert?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay,
Rusert.
Okay, thank you. And Reverend Megan DeWald, and I am so excited. And so what we do here is I like to start with sharing how I met our guest. And I would say this was 2015. And I was looking online, really in seminary. I had just graduated seminary a few years earlier, and I was really thinking about how can I serve young people and how can I be prepared? As someone who is a lifelong scholar, I have been in college for like 16 years. I was looking at programs, and I found the Youth and Theology program at Princeton Theological Seminary. I decided to apply, and I'll never forget, I was in the continuing ed office at Virginia Union University with who I call affectionately Grandma Jackie. And I got the call from Abigail, and we had our interview. And what was great about the conversation, especially since our audience is primarily students, was I was really good at being a student, but I needed to transition to having a little bit more confidence in working and confidence about myself outside of being a student. And so this program was something that I felt was too big at the time. And I said, I'll apply. And so we had such a great conversation, and I got a call, I think a couple days later, or maybe like a week later, that I had gotten into the program. And then it was, now you have to go to Princeton. Let me tell you about me back in the day. So I could not drive that great, and I had never driven that far north. And so if you've never driven to New Jersey from Virginia, it's a good little ride. And I just remember someone saying, when you get up like past Maryland, take 295. So then I took 95 to 295. And I just remember feeling very much like a quest. Like I was on this quest. I love the hero's journey. And so having to go through these windy roads and all of that, the potholes, that was the other thing I noticed, was like there were a lot of potholes.
And really, I imagine you encountered some really patient drivers.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. People were beeping their horns because I don't like driving fast. And so it was just a feat to get there. But I knew that I needed to be at Princeton. I knew. And the other thing that brought that full circle was when I was young, I actually wanted to go to Princeton. I didn't even apply undergrad. But I wanted to go because of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And Carlton went to Princeton. And yes, and so I felt like that was such a full circle moment. And so I get there for the retreat and meet some amazing other ministers who, like me, were non-traditional, which could be a long conversation for another day, but who, like me, were living their authentic lives and wanting to serve God in a way that wasn't just about the church. And the thing that I appreciated about Abigail, because Megan came a little bit later, was this reality that you could be your full self and serve God, and that because at the time, Abigail, you were pregnant, and then we had the
taking me back.
Yes. And what was great though was I had never seen people in ministry leadership, not even at my own seminary, who just shared about their kids and just felt very human, very accessible. You made ministry just very accessible. It wasn't such a big thing to work with youth. Yes, of course, this is a great call to work with young people. But when we had our first retreat, I felt like it was confirmed that this was for me. The youth ministry wasn't a stop along the way, as some people do. And it wasn't something to bypass in ministry. Like, oh, we're going to check this off the list, but that there is value in walking alongside young people. And so that started a 2-year journey. And then Megan came in just at the time. I just felt like you came in a whirlwind. In a beautiful
it felt like
way,
that
though.
for me as well.
Right. And your authenticity with like, I'm trying to figure it out, like y'all are trying to figure it out. But particularly like in the Black church, we don't figure it out publicly. Like we don't do that. And so to see that was so refreshing. To see that, and both of you all have these, amazing Ivy League degrees, but didn't make us feel like we were ingratiated to you, and didn't make us feel like we had to like kiss the ring.
Goodness.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
And if anything, we were ingratiated to you.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly.
Our cohorts are our favorite.
Yes. And the cohort C Harmony, that's our name. And to have us come together from all regions of the country, just wanting to do this, to do ministry, youth ministry well for our young people, but also taking care of ourselves. This was also the first time in ministry that I thought about, like we often talk about self-care, but that you matter in ministry as a human being. You cannot be great for who you're serving, for God, without taking care of yourself. And so I am so grateful to have you all here, that you're a part of my journey. We follow each other on social media when I'm on Facebook. Sometimes I'm not. But I'm just so glad that you are here. But let's get started with our conversation. So my first question is, how are you? How are you today?
Abigail, how are you today?
That requires deep and abiding connection to your feelings.
Right. Which is your brand.
A distant memory for me. No. So typically I'll answer this. I'm doing pretty well, I think. A little bit of a season of overwhelm. In this, pandemic. It's been just sort of the ever-present learning curve for how to do things inside of a new season. And I think we experience that almost doubly because we're watching leaders go through that learning curve so often. So sometimes I can't discern whether or not I'm feeling my own overwhelm or others, or just, consistently sort of having a connection to all of it.
Right.
But there's a beauty in being at the time of this. Is it okay if I talk about the time of year that we're recording this?
Absolutely. I'll provide the context at the beginning of the episode.
Great. So at the time of year that we're recording this, it's Advent. And for those of us in the Christian tradition who celebrate Advent is this season of waiting, a season of longing, a season of hope. So I'm deeply resonant with that season.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's helpful, actually, to be reminded that we're in this season of Advent and how it's connected to our longing. Because one of the things I was thinking about the question, how are you? And rather than just saying, I'm doing well, I wrote down like 6 different adjectives that describe my emotional state.
Yes.
One of them, I said, I'm tired.
I
am tired. I am lonely. This season has been the season of pandemic, and then even this sort of re-entry post-vaccine pandemic time that we're navigating has also still involved quite a bit of isolation for me. And some of that has been brought on by the fact that I now find other people
really exhausting in ways that,
not the least of whom is
right.
me.
in ways that I didn't before. No, in ways that I didn't before. And I already found people exhausting in some ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, just feeling lonely and isolated still, but also like protective of my peace and myself.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote down also that I'm feeling grateful, and I am. I'm just filled with a lot of gratitude for, gosh, every day, every breath in this season. And then what I appreciate about you naming, Abigail, the season that we're in Advent is because I also wrote down wistful.
Ooh.
Because I've been thinking about how
I like that.
I have been, I feel a kind of like a nostalgia for the future.
Right.
Right. Where I'm not really in the thinking about the past. I mean, the past is the past, and whatever the world was pre this pandemic and all that has transpired really for the last like 5 years or so in our country and then beyond, like we're in a brave new world.
Right.
But I find myself longing to get to that in some way, and maybe
Right.
even seeing places of hope and joy, but they feel still far off. So I do feel like I'm longing for them. So I wrote down wistful as some way that I'm being right now, but I think it also ties into this season.
I love that. And it's funny you say that because I have been watching actually since 2019 turning into 2020, New Year's Eve, 2019, my sister and I watched all 3 Back to the Futures, and I have been very interested in time as well. And how if we're able to manipulate time. Like I've been telling my family, I've already started 2022. When we're taping, it's December 2nd. But in my mind, I have already started the new patterns that I want to start and the goals and the joy of a new year before we get here. Thank you. So let's talk about students. So this podcast is for students. So how were you either in secondary school, college, or both? What kind of student were you?
You go
Should
first.
I go first this time? Okay. Well, this might tell you a little bit of the kind of student I was because I printed out all of your questions, Tanya, in advance and wrote detailed notes about what I wanted to say.
Yes.
So
it's a good indicator.
Yeah. But then in real time, once I have the answers down, I feel free to riff in real time, but I need the words on the page, which, I guess correlates well to the kind of student I was. So I was thinking about this question and your own brilliance as an educator, youth minister, leader. And I was thinking about how it is that, we have been formed. And I realized that for me, so much of my educational journey was one in which I experienced a kind of conveyor belt system where I was like I was a product put on a conveyor belt and expected to like move from teacher to teacher or moment to moment, and I needed to like shine and do the right thing in order to stay on the conveyor belt to get to the next thing, then the next thing, and so as a student both in college and in secondary school, I think really I was afraid. I was afraid to get anything wrong. I was afraid to make mistakes. I really coveted affirmation, especially from teachers, and worked really, really hard. I studied hard. I tried to absorb information like a sponge so that I could then regurgitate it in the way that I thought my teachers would want to hear it.
Right.
And I cared deeply about what those teachers thought of me. And I sought this sort of external reward for that. And I think in this grade-based system that I was in secondary school and in college, there was this sense of you want to try to figure out the sweet spot for doing the minimal effort for the maximum reward. But the focus wasn't on learning for learning's sake.
Right.
And I don't think I actually, although like anyone that was my teacher or a peer would have put me in the category of being like one of the smart kids or, someone that blew the curve or, all of those things. But but I don't think I actually learned to learn until I got to seminary. So until my, graduate school work. And part of that was that I found the wonder and beauty of the pass-fail class, where I could take a class that I was interested in and focus on learning, learning the content, and rather than trying to get the good grade. And that was just a paradigm shift. It felt like I jumped off the conveyor belt around that time. And I was finally like, oh, there's another way of being and learning and doing. So that's how I would describe myself as a student then. But I think I've become a very different kind of student now.
Wow. Thank you. So are you saying that wait, I just want to back up. So with the classes were some classes pass fail or all?
Sure.
Only just a handful. Yeah, just a handful. Not all of the classes are pass fail at Princeton Seminary.
Princeton, where everything is pass fail.
No.
No.
That'd be like really bad marketing.
Yeah. No, it's it is the case that some classes are designated pass fail. It's decided before you get here. Something like we have a speech requirement for incoming first year students, and that's a pass fail class. And part of it is you're going to focus on doing the thing, and we're not going to necessarily grade you ABC whatever if you're but you're gonna focus on the embodied learning of that practice. And so it's a pass fail thing. Do it, show up, try your best, you'll pass. Don't show up, don't do it, you'll fail. And a couple other classes are like that. But there was also the option, once I experienced the wonder of that, the little few classes that were at the beginning, I then sought out at least one class a semester. I would go to the registrar and, take that class, pass fail. So that, and usually it was the one I was most interested in, because it was like, I want to learn this material and I don't want to be beholden to all of the scripts I've been taught previously about what it means to be a good student. I want to actually learn and engage with this material. So I'm going to take a pass fail and I'm going to focus on the learning.
And I think that sometimes students who go on the conveyor belt, to use your analogy, they distrust their educators because it isn't quite what they thought it was going to be. Or sometimes they may be yanked off the conveyor belt, or something's added that they didn't know was going to be an obstacle. And I love that analogy. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. Because teaching then in that space, it can feel like a manipulation, that I know this is a question for further down, we'll explore later, but this idea, if you're just a cog on the wheel is not the right analogy, but if you're a part on a conveyor belt, each teacher is just going to manipulate you a little bit and send you on the way, versus cultivating real learning within you, which I think is a different process. Abigail?
Well, I resonate with what you said about seeking affirmation from teachers. I still do that with anybody I view in my life as a teacher. I wrote these are my notes, for the record. This is how many notes I have. There's like 6 things written on this page.
Different styles.
Right. All beautiful.
Beautiful. Super different. I would say I wrote the words I wrote down to answer this question are diligent and a bit dreamy. So as a student, I was diligent and a bit dreamy. Recently, I gifted my mother a gift that requires her to write stories every week. And after a year, those stories are all captured in a book. And one of the things I strategically asked her throughout the year was to just talk about what she loves about each of her kids. I put myself last. I'm her final child of many children that she had. But it was interesting when I read what she wrote about me, it speaks to this question too. She said, I'm not going to capture her words exactly, but she talked about how throughout my life, I would go to her and I would, if I really wanted something, I would sit her down and I would make a case for what I wanted. And I would have sort of a little presentation prepared for her.
That checks out.
And I think I get this. This was in the water with my parents, and I think how they raised us as well. You really wouldn't get any headway in my household growing up if you weren't able to make a case for why you wanted the thing you wanted. And it had to be well thought out, and you had to think about sort of points of refutation for different things you might come up against.
It should be noted you were a lawyer's daughter.
I am.
Oh.
So there
That
you go.
makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And so I also so diligent and a bit dreamy, someone who makes a case. But I think what that means is then whenever I was in a classroom, I would really deeply resonate. It was more when I hit college. It was when I hit college that I began to understand my learning style the best. But it was something that had to be utterly captivating. I had a Latin professor once who stopped because I took 2 different classes from him. One was just a Latin language course. I did horribly in that course. I don't know what grade I got, but it definitely didn't take it pass fail. I don't even know if I would have passed if I took it pass fail. And then I took some sort of a Greek culture course with him, and we were reading about culture and reflecting on that. And I in the Latin course, I just kept my head down and got a bad grade. And in the other one, I was raising my hand, and he stopped in the middle of class and he pointed at me after I said something once, and he goes, "Oh, you're a text person. You're like a story person." And I said, "Oh, okay, thanks." Awkward in the college classroom to be called out like that.
Right.
And it was in my last year of college that I sat in a classroom, and as a student, I knew I had really come alive when I left. It was a theology class, and I left that class and I went immediately to the library, and I could not possibly leave the library until the next class that I had, because I already wanted to learn more and know more about what I was being taught in that classroom. The classroom gave me permission to be a Christian in afresh and anew when I was a college student specifically. So diligent, a bit dreamy, engaged well around a text. That was the kind of student I am.
Wow, thank you.
Don't put me in a language course. Also failed out of Hebrew. So
I met Abigail in a language course. In seminary.
Yeah. And I cried my way through that course.
Which was great because I now know that crying isn't, Abigail expresses her emotions in healthy ways, but I am of the two of us, I am the crier. I am the crier.
Sure.
Really?
I am the feeler of all the feelings. But it was interesting because at that time I was struggling to feel like, are there any humans at this school? Everyone's just like a robot,
right here.
And all of a sudden this beautiful, wonderful human shows up and is struggling like you shared earlier, Tanya, was struggling and being like a human. And I was like, oh, this person's interesting. Like someone crying in class, I can get behind that. So we did.
Yeah. The long, long road to learning that languages were not going to be my thing, just ever. I don't know why I ever continued to try, but here we are.
Yeah.
That is so interesting that you all knew each other before.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And then there was a 15-year hiatus.
A long hiatus.
Where we didn't really talk to each other for 15 years.
It was just 10 years. Quit trying to date us.
Okay, whatever. I'm almost 40. You just turned 40. It's fine.
I know.
Wow.
But every year counts. Yeah, there was a hiatus.
It's funny you say that about the emotional piece, because I think about as a cohort, really what I think about is when we had our final ceremony, and I remember crying through the whole thing. I just cried through the entire, I just so weepy, but they were tears of relief, and not all tears are of sadness.
Right.
Amen.
And so I appreciate you mentioning that. That made me think of that. So let's talk about, as we've alluded to, what was a major factor or the major factors in your decision to becoming integral parts of the IYM?
Well, I'll start because we just kind of started talking about that a little bit. The short answer, and the short and honest answer, is that I needed a job and they were hiring. That's real. Short and honest answer, which is real. I think, to your future or your current listeners, sometimes when we are talking about vocation and sense of calling and sense of direction, there can be this sort of mystical thing wrapped up in it. And I believe in a lot of that as well. But then there are also the practical elements of I needed a job, right. And had expanded my search beyond the state I was living in and found out that the IYM was hiring. A little bit longer story was that I knew PTS because of having gotten my MDiv here in 2009. Mm-hmm. And I knew that Abigail Rusert had just been named the director of the IYM, had gotten a promotion from the assistant position that she was hiring for. And I remembered her from seminary. And, though we did have this hiatus, we were Facebook friends. So I had seen that she had, bought a couple of houses and had a couple kids and married a really great guy. I just followed along with her life a little bit. Right. And, the just other events going on in her life. And I know she had followed around, my stuff as well. So when we reconnected, we were very different people than we were when we were in seminary. And just because humans grow in 10 years. But we also, I knew like the heart of this person is someone that I wanted to work with and alongside. And I knew even back in seminary that she was doing great stuff and was bound to do that. And so it is the case that I needed a job and they were hiring, but I was also eager to work with Abigail. And then the longer version is just that this role came along in the strangest way as this culmination of so many disparate threads that I was having a hard time putting together in my own vocational journey. Youth ministry and young adult ministry and peer learning and formation and spiritual direction and creativity and serving the church and bringing people together. All of those things were kind of, in these disparate places in my life. And then I got this job description. And writing and editing and, creating resources. It all came along and it was like, here's what you've been doing for the past 15 years. Why don't you apply for this job? And so that's how it began. And we've just, been setting the world on fire ever since.
Yes.
It was that easy, right?
Oh my word. I love that. It's so interesting to listen to you tell your story because I was on the other side of that hiring process. Right. And I can't remember how many applications we got, but it was a nail-biting, I
applied on the last day.
You applied at 5 p.m.
5 p.m. on the last day.
And it was distressing because I had already identified the person and actually offered a job
right?
to somebody. Wow. And then they turned it down. Anyway. That was a really grueling, different, very Holy Spirit driven process on the other side. So I love hearing that you just needed a job. That the most basic one. I'm like, wow. All those other applicants are like, really?
Yes, I needed to pay my rent. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh. But the story of going to the IYM for me was I had applied for. I have to keep this anonymous somehow. I had applied for a job that I thought was perfect for me in a town that shall remain unnamed. Okay. But one that's very close to my heart. And it just would have put me in a particular proximity. And I was a pastor, prior to coming into this role at the Institute for Youth Ministry. I'm still a pastor, but I was serving a congregation. And so I'd applied to this other congregational role. And the story that I like to tell is, I went to the interview. I got an immediate interview. I went to the interview. I showed up in person. And then I don't even know if I think I hadn't even gotten home, but they had driven to my house and put the rejection letter in the mailbox. I mean, I'm lying. This is hyperbole, but the rejection came so quickly that I was like, whoa, okay, never mind. I definitely idealized that opportunity. I guess it threw me into a vocational tizzy. And then I remember I had read just all the youth ministry books. I had read all of them. And I used an author's name as a verb at one point. So this may mean nothing to some of your listeners, but Mark DeWries is an important youth ministry writer and person in my life. And I decided to what I call Mark DeWries it. So I said, I'm just going to Mark DeWries my current job, which means stay and be committed to my current role in this pastoral thing that I was committed to, this youth ministry pastoral role. And right after doing that, I cultivated a relationship with the Institute for Youth Ministry because I wanted to start really just enlivening the training opportunities that were available for my denomination and the local pastors who were part of my denomination. And in the process of cultivating that relationship, there was the, hey, did you know we're going to be hiring soon conversation came. And because I had decided to Mark DeVries my job, it was slightly complicated. But I had the best and most incredible boss. I've been blessed with incredible bosses. And so this particular boss, I went to him and he just blessed it. He said, just go for the interview, go for it, try it out. And every step of the way was super supportive. And I got the job. In the culture of the place that I entered at the Institute for Youth Ministry was a culture of vocational friendship. So I think it's something that happens in the course of our programming that we do, but it's also part of the work culture. There's this beautiful gray area of yes, we're doing this particular job together, and yes, we have hours in which we do that work, but we're also friends. We experience this vocational tether and friendship among each other as a staff, even while trying to cultivate that in the communities of leaders we serve.
Thank you. And it's so funny when you said that, because now I actually remember exactly why I applied. Was I had started my youth theater company that's faith-based.
We were, I know, we were huge fans.
And I remember feeling like our young people deserve to have a fully trained leader. That even though I was working on a degree in theater, I knew that my call was twofold, that it had to be theology and art together. And to hear you both speak, I was like, wait. It wasn't just because I wasn't serving in a church at the time. And I was like, what was it? Like, I just didn't do. And that's what it was, to be able to serve the young people better. Now let's talk a little bit about genius or purpose.
Let's mix it up. I think you should go first.
All right. Well, it's funny. I was reflecting on this question out loud as we were setting up to come into this audio booth today. And so two of the people who work on Princeton Seminary's campus and help us with things like setting up the audio booth came in, and I said, what is my genius or purpose? And they, without hesitation, said, the people you hire. And I was like, you are 100% right about that.
Good.
And so I think that I have an eye for talent. I think that I have also just, I think I have that capacity to be disarming enough for maybe not everybody, but certain personality types. So that when we're together and when we're working together, it truly feels like we're doing something together. And I think the space that can be cultivated then is shared. I'm nervous because Megan's sitting right next to me, so I don't know what's going on in her inner monologue right now. And I'm like, don't say too much. But what I aim to cultivate, right, is just a collaborative leadership model in everything that I do. And I sometimes do it accidentally. But the best thing, we've had other staff members who we've worked with. Some have come and gone. And a lot of times what we've watched happen as people move on from the IYM, and this is in the water, this is pre-me too, but just that people move on to these incredible things after they work here. And so I think I'm good at pulling people into the team to do the work.
That's great.
I'd affirm that. I think
you should, because you're amazing.
I'm like,
right.
I'm like, case in
hiring
right.
people. Well, so I want to go back to.
Would I say that?
No,
was
you
wrong?
said nothing wrong. No. But I wanted to go back to the idea when I said I needed a job and you guys were hiring. I should mention that I was in a period of my life where I was applying to.
Oh, how many jobs did you apply to?
In 8 months, I applied to 84 jobs.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was just sitting around and, the IYM's hiring. I'll just submit my application and see. It was like a season of.
No, you were out there. You were out there.
And part of why I want to affirm what you said is even in those initial conversations that we were having, we were navigating that sort of tenuous space of, we know we have this history as friends, and we both were like, we're already committed to the mission of the Institute for Youth Ministry, so much so, you know, I'm not getting a paycheck, you know, and I don't want you to hire me if I'm not the right person,
right?
You know, and Abigail was very, you know, just exercised such tremendous like boundary and skill in navigating that. And I've seen her do that now again and again, bringing people onto our team, whether they be, you know, people that we partner with for grant projects, or people who are serving in administrative roles, or program coordinating roles. It's been really something beautiful to see. And I think it grows out of, I would say your genius is just networking, you know, but networking has such a like a businessy connotation that can be kind of negative. It's like you form community. You form community with people, and that's what I think your genius is.
Oh,
so, and you hired me, which was an amazing decision.
Yes.
It's a skill set.
It is a skill set. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this, and I didn't want to put down one answer, because I thought, gosh, I hope I have lots of geniuses. You know?
Yes.
I hope I have and lots of purposes. And I hope I continue to discover those as I get older and learn more. I already feel like I've lived a couple lives, maybe not whole, you know what I mean though? Like I've been a couple women already, and I'm going to be a couple more before I die. And I'm excited about that. So I'll see where that leads. I could point to, I think I have a good sense of humor. I think I have, you know, empathy, compassion that can sometimes lead to some unhealth, to be honest. I think I long to see true justice for all people, and for our planet. I think that what I've really been able to note as a particular genius or gift or even purpose in this season has been my ability to cultivate spaces of belonging for people across difference. So definitely among affinity and you know, people who are similar to one another, also bringing those people together and being like, look, find one another, you know, love each other, but also being able to continue to kind of fan the flames of the Holy Spirit, you know, in cultivating spaces where people feel like they belong here and they're loved in these spaces. I think that's the gift I'm using now.
Story, as a case in point, is that we know that one of the ways that millennials express themselves in the world is through tattoos. And
that's right.
And so there's so many stories about tattoos in the IYM. That's for another podcast interview. That aside, just piquing your interest. But it sounds weird. Anyway, there was one person from one of our cohorts that Megan led who ended up getting the coordinates of the Princeton Seminary quad tattooed on their arm because of how deeply their experience of community was cultivated through the Certificate in Youth and Theology program, the same one that you did a couple cohorts later, Tanya. And, you know, I think the gifts that God has given Megan for doing that kind of belonging work were very clearly, they played such a huge role in that person's experience here. So that, you know, you brought about a tattoo.
I did. You're welcome. World.
Yes.
One more millennial feeling belonging.
Right. Yes. Now let's talk about discovery. For so many students and young people and lifelong learners, whoever's listening, it's easy to kind of think about, okay, well, this is what I'm good at. Or I do feel like this is a part of my purpose. But for so many, especially I teach freshmen, so you're talking 18, 19-year-olds who are just discovering adulthood in very specific ways. How might you say you discovered your geniuses or purposes?
I am still discovering it. And like I said in the other question, I want to still be discovering genius and purpose for the rest of my life. I think I would say that listening to others and hearing their affirmations, like what you guys just just said actually means a great deal to me. I think I've had a hard time in my life trusting myself and my own voice. And so I do, plus the conveyor belt thing really trained me to need external validation in some ways. So though it has been a lot more internalized in recent years, I do value the perspective of people that I respect. And I think practicing and trial and error is a lot of how I've come to realize some of the gifts and purpose and genius, as you put it. There's a great quote from IDEO from a Dateline documentary from like a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Anyway, I'm old. And it's this. The quote is, "Enlightened trial and error succeeds over the lone genius."
Ooh.
Let me say that again.
I love that.
It's really good.
Enlightened trial and error succeeds over the lone genius. And I wrote that on a sticky note when I heard it, and I put it on my computer. My computer is more like a bulletin board for all my sticky notes than it is anything. And I put it on my computer so that I would see it all the time and remember, like, I don't have to just be struck by, in a moment of inspiration or genius, but rather learning, making mistakes, failing, getting back up, trying again, tweaking, all of that is on the way to genius and purpose. So I'm trying to keep that at the forefront of my mind as I hope to keep discovering it.
Thank you. On the way. I like that.
It's very hard to answer this question. I suppose the two answers I would give, one would be, it's very similar to your answer, Megan, but it comes from a slightly different journey. I remember when I was ordained as a pastor, one of the things we had to do was articulate our sense of call to be a pastoral, serve as a pastor. And I articulated that in so far as I have always sensed a call from communities kind of external to me, naming my gifts and calling me into leadership. So I suppose, and I mean, I have all these moments and scenes that flash in front of my mind of times when that has happened. And so I think of the time when a professor, that same class that when I left class, I had to just study until I couldn't study anymore because I had my next class. That professor sat me down at one point and said, "When are you going to think about seminary?" And I wish we could talk for 4 hours about that human because he was so incredibly formative in my life. I think I discover it by people reflecting it back to me. People reflecting to me like, "Oh, this is your gift. This is your calling. This is your genius. This is your," so being able to get it held up in front of my face like a mirror is how I would answer that. And then the second thing I would say about it is the second way that I discover it, I think Zora Neale Hurston gives me the language for this. She talks about research as formalized curiosity, poking and prying with purpose. That's her quote. And so
love her.
I read, amazing, but I read that quote in a season when I was just first encountering research as part of my job, and I was feeling a lot of imposter syndrome. And when I read that quote about research being formalized curiosity, I thought, oh, that's me. That's who I am. That's what I embody. That's my work. I am a formally curious person, and the work that I do every day. So whenever I feel in that place where I'm not sort of leaning into my genius, as long as I can sort of get curious again, then I think I get back into seeing it, experiencing it, and understanding it.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I just love these conversations. I can't wait to share this with the world. But let's talk a little bit, thinking about curiosity, which for me is very much correlated to dreaming. What role does dreaming play in your life or in general?
The very central.
Abigail's life is a dream.
Deeply central. I think, and I align it most or identify with it most when I'm running. So running is my exercise of choice.
Okay.
And especially in the pandemic, when the pandemic first hit, one of the things my body immediately told me that I needed to be doing was running. And it allowed me to, I have a very, very noisy brain. So I'll sometimes drive the 50-minute commute I have to work in the morning, and I won't speak at all, and I won't have anything on the radio, and I don't even realize that I was sitting in silence.
Right.
Because that's how loud my brain is. So I'm getting tangential. But so, because I'm a dreamer, so the role that dreaming plays is, I think it's mostly around planning for me. So my dreams are actualized in my capacity and desire to and gift for planning. And I do my best dreaming and my best planning when I'm running, because there's these little breakthrough moments that, because I'm actually engaging my body, I have to move between my mind and my body. I don't get to just live in my mind when I'm running. So it either shuts down a part of my brain or turns on a part of my being, I suppose, that allows the dreams to form and the vision to form for sort of what's next in my calling, in my work, in my motherhood, in my whatever. That's how I would answer that.
Thank you.
My answer, I wrote, well, sleep plays a huge role in my life.
Again, we're different.
I love it. That's good. That's that humor.
It is. It is that humor. And it's the truth. So, I mean, actual like sleeping, napping. I'm a huge believer in the power of a nap, even just a power nap. But
Me too.
Napping as resistance. Napping as
resistance. Absolutely. Resting as resistance. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in that. I've even dug a little bit into trying to understand the scientific study of dreams and how and why they happen. I haven't been able to do this for a while, but there was a period in my life where my sleep life was so amazing that I could enter into what's called a what's it called? I want to say a liminal dream. That's not it. But anyway, there's some word I'm gonna think of probably tomorrow for the type of dream. Oh, a lucid dream. That's what's called. A lucid dream, where in the middle of your dreaming, you realize that you're dreaming.
I've had this, but only when I was little.
Yeah, you realize you're dreaming, and then you control your dream. I can't even tell you how many huge chocolate cakes I've eaten in my dream.
Yes.
And flying. Sometimes I'll just be in a conversation. I'll be like, I want to bounce, and then I'll just fly.
Right.
That's amazing. Do you ever wake up with your arms up? That used to happen to me.
That's amazing. But so I do really actually love dreams, and there's also really interesting scientific information out there about dreams and about how our brains use it to, use this time to process unconscious thoughts and material. And, the ancients were onto something when they took dreams seriously. And I think there's something really there. But in terms of daydreaming is almost constant as well in my life. And I experience it. I love hearing Abigail's, I think she hears dreaming and her definition.
I went to metaphorical.
You went to metaphorical dreaming and then talked about how you go on runs to dream in that space. Right. You're able to. And I thought I can get so caught up in the daydreams, and it's anything from imaginary conversations with other people, working out my issues, to practicing preaching in front of a mirror when I am not going to be preaching anytime soon. I can sometimes stay in my head and get so stuck in that dream space that I need to get into my body through my chosen exercise, which is yoga, to get out of my head and to allow all of that stuff going on, the noise in my brain, the noise in my mind, to simmer down and settle down in my body in other sorts of ways, meditation and breathing and mindfulness and that sort of thing. I need to ground myself in reality sometimes because I get so in my head about dreaming. But it's often I like co-dreaming, like partner dreaming with someone like Abigail, where we go into a room and it's like, let's dream this up. Let's dream this thing. Let's, throw spaghetti against a wall and see what sticks and like make this thing happen. And I enjoy doing that with someone who, believe it or not, like has, and I say believe it or not because I think sometimes, oh no, I don't know if you experience yourself this way.
Disclaimer.
But no, like that is a focus. Like we're gonna imagine this thing and then we're gonna give it a try. We're gonna dream this thing up. And I love that. I love when we get to have those kinds of times. But yeah, that's the role of dreaming in my life.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Now let's talk a little bit about mentorship. And so that was another huge thing about this first season is that I was very particular about influential and mentors in my life who have what I like to call have been architects in helping me kind of construct what this life is looking like, which is beautiful. Now let's talk a little bit about your mentoring style. How would you describe it?
Yeah. Should I start first? Okay. I think so. Another question that I had been thinking about was the question of what is teaching really about? Because those are very, they're interrelated in my imagination. So. And I think that really at the heart of it, what I was able to learn how to do in the pass fail classes was to fall in love with ideas. And that the process of learning was very much like a process of falling in love.
Right.
Parker Palmer in The Courage to Teach has this beautiful quote where he says, "The highest form of love is the love that allows for intimacy without the annihilation of difference." We have transformed love into a purely romantic enterprise. But I actually, as someone that falls on a lot of like outside of the typical for many of those kinds of constructs, I just find myself falling in love a lot. Falling in love with people, places, ideas, friends. And I think that the process of mentorship is cultivating that space of that kind of belonging space that I think is, my genius, my purpose in this time, cultivating that space and like introducing love into the life of the people who come to me for that kind of care. So I think I think there's something about being full of grace with people, being their cheerleader, not imposing my own stuff, either my own baggage or my own ideas on them, but granting them the freedom to fall in love, hopefully with themselves and their own lives, as well as introducing them to new things to be in love with.
Love that.
It's beautiful. That is so true too. You cultivate spaces of belonging and love in all that you do. It's funny. My answer is really different, which is why we work well together. Why we can mentor really different kinds of people. Yes. So, I would say the sort of social location that I come out of, and then the social location that I entered when I was a seminary student, the kind of training and formation that I received around mentoring was mostly from my pastoral care classes. And it mostly had to do with being a very sort of present listener. So we learned things like reflective listening, where you say back to the person the thing that they just said to you so that they deeply feel heard, things like that. And so the way that I was cultivated, that my mentorship was cultivated, was in this like, listen, and that can do most of the work for you if you just learn how to listen. Now, I think that's really great formation. I stand by so much in that. But I remember sitting across from someone who's going through the ordination process in my denomination once at a coffee shop, and they were telling me about this really hard challenge that they had where they were serving. They were actually serving in youth ministry at the time. And I remember just deciding to shed the listen only and speak in instead to what I thought I was hearing, and suggest something that felt pretty radical, because it felt like a direction this person didn't want to go in. But it was like burning inside of me. Like, you do not need to, the thing that I needed to say, I won't get into the nuance of it, but was basically like, I don't think you should stay in this call. I don't think you should stay at this church. Why? What is it? And so there's some of that formalized curiosity in there, but there was sort of naming the thing, naming a hard thing, and then still functioning with curiosity, like, talk me off the ledge, kind of like the lawyer's daughter, like, read me, tell me what your case is. So clearly I also was deeply formed by my parents, probably to be this kind of mentor. But just being able to look at someone in the eye and say, I don't think this is the thing. I think God might be calling you to someone else. So in my, I've noticed that, like, the most of the opportunity I have to give mentoring at this point is with seminary students. And when they come to me, it's usually the ones who need that, who end up showing up in my office, who just, they're just like, can you just not, I literally had someone say to me earlier this semester, can you just not listen to me? Can you listen to me enough to hear what I have to say? But can you just tell me what you think I should do? I may not follow your advice, but just tell me what you think I should do. Like, it struck me that, oh, that's why this student came here, because they know I'm just going to be very direct. So I would say my mentoring style is very direct. And it's not necessarily what my seminary education taught me to do. So I don't think I do it well yet. I think I'm messily figuring that out as a mentor. I mean, I'm about to turn 40. So that might sound ancient to some of your, college student listeners, but once you get here, y'all, it does not feel ancient other than the gray hair, but that's just living my truth.
Yes.
So I mean, there's something to being able to say, hey, think about this or think about that. And I'm figuring it out.
Thank you. Now let's get to the fun part. So this is my favorite part of the podcast, where as you'll get to know me, listeners, or if you already know me, you know that I'm a huge hip hop fan. I love rap, and I have gold teeth, and maybe one day I'll do a mixtape in 2022. We'll see. But in hip hop, people are always asked, who's in your top 5 dead or alive? And they usually talk about rappers. But I never assume what genre people listen to. And so for you, who are your top 5, in no particular order, musical artists?
I have to tell you something. So first is, as we were walking over here to set up in our audio booth on campus, I was remembering the questions and kind of reviewing them with Abigail a little bit. And I know this dear woman very well. And so I knew that the one question of all of these, where you're like plumbing the depths of our souls, of all the questions that would stress her out, this is the one.
What?
because I think, like, it's that kind of, I don't know.
I'm like, I don't even know what to say. Oh my gosh, what if I get it wrong? What are my top 5? I don't know.
I start telling her some of my
and I
favorites.
hate her favorites.
And immediately she was like, no. She was like, oh, that's just noise.
It is. It's literally noise. So strap in, people, because I'm about to recommend
but
noise.
But here's the other thing, is that I started thinking, it's noise. I started thinking about, I was like, well, I want to come up with my top 5 hip hop artists.
She wanted to try and be cooler
I did.
than she is.
And I didn't get very far.
Spoiler alert, I have 0 hip hop artists.
Spoiler alert. I do love Kendrick Lamar.
Okay. I like him too.
a devoted disciple, and think he's just a genius and doing some really interesting work. And this is truly one of my favorite, my top 5 musical artists, for real, is Missy Elliott.
What?
Misdemeanor Elliott.
Yes.
I love Missy. If you're listening, call me.
Yeah, and she's from Tidewater, so you never know.
There it is.
Yeah, it might be a connection. She might be listening.
There might be a connection. No, I have, like, first of all, there's some songs of hers that just remind me of high school and early college, and just like, I own her entire discography, which is a thing. And, and I still have a CD player in my car, and I have all her CDs. I was actually gifted them by someone wonderful. And I will listen to them when I just need creativity and like, I mean, this woman, the way that she, modulates her voice and uses her voice as an instrument alongside all kinds of different sounds and technologies. And I love her creativity in her music videos. And so yeah, I just, it is a true, Missy Elliott is one of my people. Second would be, a woman named St. Vincent. Actually, her name's Annie Clark, but she's an artist named St. Vincent, singer-songwriter, has done all kinds of genres, always like reinvents herself every time she puts out an album. But some of the best concerts I've ever been to have been with her. The best concert I've ever been to was a band that will fall into Abigail's category of just noise, but was truly the best concert I've ever been to, and it's Arcade Fire. She's like, I don't even know. I don't even know what that is. I mean, I've heard of them. Nonsense. But they're amazing, and I love them. I also, I grew up playing the piano, and so I do love a chick at a piano. Just and so I really love like Sarah McLachlan, Fiona Apple, Tori Amos. I'm naming a lot of different artists, but yeah, I do love them. And then I love, and I don't care what you say, I love Radiohead. Tom York, call me. I'm okay with Radiohead. That's fine. Yeah. So all of their projects, the Atoms for Peace, Tom York solo stuff, Radiohead, I'm a fan. Yeah. I like what they do with their noise. So those are my 5. My 20. Those are my 20.
This is really stressful for me. Okay.
But I have to say, I thank you, Tanya, for asking this question, because I like watching Abigail in this state of stress.
I hate it. I was a music major for like 5 minutes. So
okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. She has a beautiful, beautiful singing voice.
I can't hold a candle to Megan at this point.
Well, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Listen, my number 1 is James Taylor. Okay. And no one will ever take him from me. And I know all of his music. And when I started dating my husband, he had grown up listening to James Taylor. And you have to understand, I'm the baby of 5 kids, and all of the other ones are Gen Xers. So I grew up listening to like Madonna's Lucky Star and, and then of course James Taylor, and then Billy Joel is my other favorite. So and it was my lifelong dream to see James Taylor and Billy Joel in concert. And I'm going to cry because my husband made both of those dreams come true.
Yes.
So, which was wild to me. And it was the most amazing thing ever. And I am really solidly socially locating myself when I name those 2. Okay. Okay. But then, just a great throwback, deeply influential in my life, Mariah Carey. It is her season right now.
Yes, that's right. Taping in December. Yes,
it is.
Yes, I'm gonna listen to that on the way home today.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so it is her time. We are in her season, that's and right. She's my girl.
Mariah is the reason for the season. Isn't that how the slogan goes?
I think that's how the bumper sticker says. We need to get a bumper sticker.
Mariah is the reason for the season.
And then so there's all these composers who I think of, because as a musician, I can't sing a Morton Lauridsen song without crying, and I love a not well known at all Lutheran musician called Marty Haugen. He's a composer, Lutheran composer. Maybe he's well known. Sorry, anybody who knows him is like, of course I know.
I was like, who? What weirdo are you going to come?
I know. And then what's that other one that like every high school sings? The guy with the See, this is why I hate this.
This is why I love this, because she can't think of it.
But I think I already said 5, but I just want to name 2 more. Yep, and one is Joni Mitchell. And then another is Ani DeFranco.
You like Ani DeFranco?
I love Ani DeFranco. And really my obsession with people like Ani started with Alanis Morissette.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Like that Jagged Little
Lupil,
Pill
yeah.
deeply,
so good.
deeply at home in my... That's what I used to listen to driving to the Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well,
so that's us.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I want to thank you so much for your impact on my life. I don't want to get too deep because I don't want to cry. I don't like the sound of people crying in podcasts, so I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
But before we go, do you have any parting words before we leave?
My parting words, I mean, are for you and I guess for your listeners, but Tanya, I think you're a genius.
Amen.
Thank you.
And I am, there are people in our programs, many of them who we think, oh gosh, they should be leading this. And you are among those people.
I appreciate that.
When I learned about the work that you did and, have cultivated with integrating theater and youth ministry and your focus on empowerment and especially, in communities of color, I just think you're genius. And I feel so lucky that we get to know you and be connected with you in this way. And so I'm just grateful that we got to have this conversation. And to anyone listening, keep listening because Tanya's genius.
Amen. And I just echo the gratitude, and my parting thoughts are thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.